All right. Welcome to our 8th webinar this year. The NCRA Schools Committee has been very busy trying to bring you great content this year to help you get ready to reduce, recycle, and compost at school. And today's webinar is really important. We're excited you're all here. Just so you know, the NCRA Zero Waste Schools Committee is made up of the folks you see on this screen. We meet a lot. We talk routinely, and we've done a lot of work to plan each and every one of these webinars, which, by the way, are available on the NCRA website. If you look on the website and look under the schools committee, we'll also send you all an email to help you find it after this particular webinar is over with. But these are some hardworking folks who care very deeply about bringing you all some great information. We are recording, so I just want to make sure that if you do not want to be on the recording, you turn your video off. That's fine. We ask everybody to mute your audio because if you cough, sneeze, or turn on the radio, we'll all hear it. So go ahead and mute it. The video recording will be available at the website that you see there on your screen, and we'll also send that out via email. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. The bulk of today's presentation is going to be CalRecycle's presentation on SB 1383. But first, we're going to have a presentation by a good friend, my organization, the Go Green Initiative. Mehdi is from the Pleasanton Unified School District. He'll be talking about purchasing and some opportunities that you may be missing if you're not doing purchasing the way that Pleasanton Unified is. So in just a moment, we'll let him begin, but I want to kind of preface what Mehdi's about to present with this. If you were to talk, if this were a conference of folks who were in purchasing departments around the state, their reaction to this presentation might be, duh, of course, that's how we all do it. But I talked to Mehdi and I said, you know, your audience is different today. Sometimes we're dealing with not just school districts, but city recycling coordinators, county recycling coordinators, and folks who may be trying to help schools get the bins, the signage, and the custodial supplies they need for an integrated waste management program. But instead of going through a school district's purchasing department and taking advantage of the volume purchasing that you can achieve, they may be purchasing things elsewhere and paying way too much. So could you please, this is what I asked Mehdi, could you please walk us through your process? And so Mehdi, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir. And just let me know when you want me to flip to the next slide.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you and presenting our green purchasing process. Again, as Jill mentioned, this process may be very much familiar with you, for you, and then you have been all along doing this, and a lot of you go through this process already. But again, as something that we put together to make sure to present what you are doing and how successful we have been with our team, our extended team, the green team, and also the custodians who are supporting. Basically, they are the forefront of the implementing of the entire green initiative process. If you would go to the first slide. So as with all the actions that we take, I think you are going backward. Yes. As we, with all actions that we take across the district, and also this is an industry standard, the Deming cycle. It starts with the first on the upper right hand side, the plan, identify the problems, identify the issue, and then basically test the potential solutions, look at all different ways of addressing the problem, and starting implementing the plans that we have basically come up with. The next one is your check and study all the results from the work that you have implemented. And the last one is act, which is you identify the problems that you were facing, and you act upon them. You make corrective actions or you do preventive actions. And then again, you start the process from scratch. Basically, that becomes like an iterative process to go through the entire Deming cycle, as you see, plan, do, check, act, which is a very, very common process in the industry. I will go through every one of these plan first. One of the things we do is that we start with the full assessment of each campus. Each campus obviously is different. They have different requirements, and there are different, I would say, they're all the students and teachers, but there are different teams as well, and they have different requirements. We look at what they have to begin with, what are the shortcomings, and what additional things that we are thinking about. We go do site inspection. We work with the custodians to understand what areas are requiring some additional support. My counterpart, Juan Sanchez, he's the manager of the custodial services. He's actually attending this meeting as well. He and I go to different sites, inspect the areas, and identify locations that could benefit from adding additional resources to those areas. We talk to the management, we get report and recommendations from the management. We also talk to the green teams, Mallory and Jill, and also with the school's green teams. And we get a lot of input basically from all different areas. We analyze them, we combine all this information, and we come up with some solutions. If you go to food, please go to the next one. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what we do. So we go to the school, we get the map of the school and identify which areas require a 3-bin and which areas require only a single bin. As you see, we have highlighted the yellow ones, which is the quad area where the students are mostly participating for the lunch programs and taking their break. We identify some to be in those areas, and then we identify some other areas as pink for standalone units, which is the trash cans. We go through this process. This is basically becomes the initial plan. We go through that, and these are additional. These are not all the. You may wonder, okay, what happens to building like JV baseball field? What happens over there? What happens to around building behind it? These are additional to what they already have in those areas. This is not a reflection of the entire solution which is on the ground. If you go please to the next plan, next slide. So from here, we start collecting all the information. We put all the information, all the requirements together, and we start working with different vendors. We have established vendors, and we're always ready to test new vendors and check with them and find out what's in the market. There are a few vendors we have been working with them in the past, and we have added Cal Janitorial Supply recently. Supply Works, which is the Home Depot, Cold Supplies, Kelly Splicers, Cal Janitorial Supplies, and Baxi. They all provide different quotations to us based on the requirements. And then what we do is that we look at check out the availability of the product, look at the pricing, and also basically looking at, sorry, hold on a second. Looking at all different, basically the lead time, the shipping charges, and the pricing from all different locations and all different vendors. Please go to the next slide. One of the things we do, we are very specific and it's very important to us is that we sample products from these vendors. If you don't know the product and we have not bought the product before from this vendor, let's say the Cal Janitorial Supply, if we decide to buy something from them we have not bought, we ask for one sample. We buy one unit, we take it to the site, we look at it ourselves, how sturdy they are, what's the quality, and how easy is the operation with the unit. We also do the same thing for chemicals. For example, if you want to introduce new chemicals to the mix, we do exactly the same. Last year, actually 2 years ago, we completely switched to green products, and what we did, from a few vendors, we got different chemicals, products, and we brought them. We gave a sample to like four schools, and they tested it, and all agreed on one product. And we started basically implementing the whole process across the school district. And we removed the old product, which were mostly very heavy chemicals, and we all switched to green chemicals. So the sampling process is very important for us. And believe it or not, we have come up with a lot of ideas when we get the samples, and we go through that and we say, oh, no, this is not the right product for us. We need to get another one. And this has happened many, many times for us for all different products, including hand sanitizers, including hand sanitizer dispensers, including paper towel dispensers. Every one of them, we go through the testing with the schools and with the sites to make sure what it really meets our requirements. Please go to the next slide. Now, this is the stage that we place the POs. We work very closely with purchasing department and the warehouse. I also manage the warehouse at the Pleasanton Unified, and basically we set up different processes based on the timeline. For example, if it is too late, we tell them just go take it directly to the school sites. If it is not, it comes to the warehouse, and the warehouse delivers it to the sites. Please go to the next one. At this time, we are done with the process. We start the implementation. We put all the tags. We put all the labels for every trash bin, trash or recycling or green bin. We get the liners. Depending on for example, the green, we have the green liner, and for the other ones, we have just regular liners. The process has started, and from our side, the process is complete. Now we look at the improvements. As we move forward and as we see deficiencies, for example, we see in one area, we have put one trash can, and it is not really sufficient. People are putting constantly, they are putting green and also recycling materials in the trash bin. We start looking at it. We take photos, we come and work with the green teams and start implementing, adding some more either green or recycling bin to the other areas. So that's how the analysis is done. And based on those, we start taking action. If you go please to the next one. And this is my thank you to you all guys for listening and watching this. So basically, this is the iterative process, the whole process from planning, implementing, analyzing what we have done, and checking all the shortcomings, and taking corrective and preventive action for and improving the whole process. Again, the process may seem very simple and straightforward, but there is a lot of work and planning and energy behind it to make things happen and make it very successful for us.
Mehdi, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think that, one of the things I've seen with my own two eyes is the collaboration between Mehdi, Juan Sanchez, who's also on the call. Hey, Juan, and every single school site green team in terms of making sure that they have the right bins, the right signage, the right setup, and the willingness to continue working on solutions together as both a school site team and a district team to ensure that the right solutions are in place. We want to get right into the CalRecycle presentation. I know there are questions, but we will try to answer those a little bit later, or we'll get those to you in written form. So Mehdi, I know you have a busy day. Juan, same thing. I hope to see you guys soon. We're right about 2 miles from each other right now. Have a good day, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And just so you all know, if this is something that you'd like to explore in more depth, we could do a whole webinar on this. If this is something that tickles your fancy and you want to know more, let us know. We'll make it happen. Well, now it is my distinct pleasure to bring CalRecycle to the stage. And Curie, I'm going to try and do a better job of running your slides. There's a little lag time, just so you know. So if you tell me next slide, I'm working on it. But we are so excited to have Curie and her team. We're also excited to have Kara Morgan, branch director for CalRecycle, on the phone as well, or on Zoom as well. And without further ado, let me share my slides. And Curie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Or I can, okay, or I can do it. It's up to you.
There we go.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much for that introduction. We are super excited to be here at NCRA and spreading the word about SB 1383. We do have a lot to cover, so we'll go ahead and get started. Next slide. So many individuals monitor school waste, including school district administrators concerned about increases in solid waste disposal costs, recycling conscious teachers and students, and city county recycling coordinators working with a local school district. There are a number of recycling laws that affect school districts and schools that I will briefly touch upon before diving into the SB 1383 regulation requirements. The first is mandatory commercial recycling, which is impacting schools that generate at least 4 cubic yards of municipal solid waste per week. Then there's mandatory commercial organics recycling, impacting schools that generate 2 cubic yards of solid waste per week. That is 2 cubic yards of trash, recycling, and organics total. Next slide. There's AB 827, the collection container requirements impacting schools in areas where recycling and organics is generated. Schools must provide an appropriate container adjacent to the solid waste container to collect and divert recycling and organic waste. In September 2016, Governor Brown set methane emission reduction targets for California, Senate Bill 1383, in a statewide effort to reduce emissions of short-lived climate pollutants by reducing organic waste disposal by 50% by 2020 and 75% by 2025. As part of California's larger strategy to combat climate change, SB 1383 also established an edible food recovery goal that no less than 20% of currently disposed edible food must be recovered for human consumption by 2025. I would like to clarify that these goals are not for individual jurisdictions, local education agencies, or for individual food facilities. Rather, it is a statewide goal that Californians must collectively achieve to address our climate crisis now. There are many examples of wasted food rather than feeding people that are hungry. Since COVID-19, the number of people that do not have enough food to eat has doubled, which is another reason why these regulations are so critical. This law was designed to reduce the global warming super pollutants like methane, which is up to 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So recycling organic waste and recovering edible food is a fast track to combating climate change. Next slide, please. SB 1383 defines a local education agency as a school district, charter school, or county office of education that is not subject to the control of city or county regulations related to solid waste. Examples include all public school sites, other facilities such as the district office, central kitchen, athletic campus concession stands, and maintenance and operation locations. Organic waste is defined as solid waste that contains material that came from a living organism. Some examples listed include food, landscape waste, lumber, and paper products. Next slide, please. So here are the requirements for local education agencies. They are related to Article 5, or they can be found in Article 5. The requirements also connect with Article 3, such as what local education agencies have to do for containers, which I'll cover in a moment. So let's look at each of these organic waste recycling requirements. The first is that local education agencies must either subscribe to collection service or self-haul organic waste. They can have a 3, 2, or single unsegregated collection service, but the service must comply with the requirements in Article 3. For example, Article 3 states that if a school has a single unsegregated collection service or uses a 2-container collection service, then the material in the gray container must go to a high diversion organic waste processing facility. The second requirement, local education agencies need to provide containers that conform to the container color and label requirements for the collection of organic waste and non-organic recyclables in all areas where disposal containers are located except the restrooms. The internal container must have a body or lid that conforms with the container colors provided by the jurisdiction's organic waste collection service, or have container labels that comply with the labeling requirements. Local education agencies are not required to replace functional containers that do not comply with the requirements of this article before the end of the useful life of those containers or prior to January 1, 2036, whichever comes first. So to explain this further, here is an example. If the collection service is a 3-container system, then you need to have a green, blue, and gray internal container, or the 3 internal containers need to be labeled appropriately. The container color and material specifications standardize collection container colors and minimal levels of acceptable materials provided across the state. The standardized approach helps in knowing what containers to use and ensures that organic waste are transported to the appropriate facilities for recovery. It is important to point out that if a local education agency does not generate any of the materials that would be collected in one type of container, then they do not have to provide that particular container in all areas where disposal containers are provided. The next requirement. Prohibit employees from placing organic waste in a container not designated for organic waste to help minimize contamination and ensure that the maximum amount of organic waste is recovered. This helps to minimize contamination and ensures that the maximum amount of organic waste is recovered. The next requirement, periodically inspect organic waste containers for contamination. And if the containers are contaminated, inform employees of the requirement to only use those containers for organic waste. This ensures that local education agencies are communicating to employees when containers are contaminated, and when needed, educating employees about the proper use of organic waste containers. The last requirement on this slide, provide information to employees and students on methods for the prevention of organic waste generation. Also, nothing prohibits a local education agency from preventing waste generation, managing organic waste on site, or using a community composting site. These are additional options available to prevent the creation of, as well as to recycle organic waste beyond subscribing to an organic waste collection service or self-hauling to a facility that processes organic waste for recycling. Next slide, please. So CalRecycle shall waive a local education agency's obligation to comply with some or all of the organic waste collection requirements if the local education agency provides documentation demonstrating that any of the following situations apply. If a local education agency generates a de minimis amount of material in the blue and/or green container, it can be issued a waiver. De minimis amounts are either of the following. Solid waste is 2 cubic yards or more, and organic waste is less than 20 gallons per week. Or solid waste is less than 2 cubic yards and organic waste is less than 10 gallons per week. For example, in a 3-container collection service, if there is no organic waste stream present or material that would go in the green container, then a green container collection service is not necessary. However, a blue recycling collection container would still need to be provided for the collection of other organic waste materials such as paper products and cardboard. A space waiver may be granted for a local education agency if it provides documentation that there is inadequate space for separate organic waste containers. I do need to note, though, that there are a few instances in which an existing waste collection space could not accommodate an additional organic waste recycling container if the existing containers were downsized. If a jurisdiction that a local education agency is located in is granted a low population, rural exemption, or elevation waiver, then the local education agency will not have to comply with these requirements. The local education agency will need to submit a request to CalRecycle. This was done because if the jurisdictions in these areas do not have to comply with Article 3, then there will not be any collection services available for local education agencies to utilize. CalRecycle's website has the jurisdiction and census tracts information online, and local education agencies can review this information to determine if they are in a jurisdiction or census tract that is waived. I would like to note that a school site may want to coordinate with the school district to determine if the entire school district is eligible or just certain sites, and then determine if the school district will submit the waiver request. Next slide, please. So let's now discuss the edible food recovery requirements. So what does edible food mean? It means food intended for human consumption. We also specify in the regulations that nothing requires that edible food be recovered if it does not meet the food safety requirements of the California Retail Food Code. So just because a food is intended for human consumption does not mean it is safe to recover. It must be intended for human consumption and also meet all of the food safety requirements that are specified in California's Retail Food Code. We also specified in the definition of edible food that it is not solid waste if it is recovered and not discarded. So this is really important. This is material that is before the trash container. This is food and not waste. So the photos on the left were taken from one of CalRecycle's waste prevention and rescue grant recipients. These are some of the recoveries that are occurring in K-12 schools and school kitchens. So showing a contrast, the food on the right is from an unsupervised open buffet line where customers serve themselves. Most county health departments would not allow that food to be donated. Next slide, please. So there are two categories for mandated food donors, which is also known as commercial edible food generators. So Tier 1 begins implementation January 1, 2022. 2-tier begins implementation January 1, 2024. So as you can see, local education agencies with an on-site food facility are commercial edible food generators and must recover the maximum amount of edible food starting January 1, 2024. The regulations state that a food facility has the same meaning in section 113789 of the Health and Safety Code. So in the Health and Safety Code, it defines a food facility as an operation that stores, prepares, packages, serves, vends, or otherwise provides food for human consumption at the retail level, and includes permanent and non-permanent food facilities, including public school cafeterias. Additional Tier 2 examples is if an athletic campus concession stand meets the large venue definition, then they must also recover the maximum amount of edible food. If a local education agency uses a food service provider, then the food service provider has requirements to recover the excess edible food that it generates, which started January 1, 2022. Next slide, please. So the key requirements for commercial edible food generators is to arrange to have the maximum amount of edible food that would otherwise be disposed, be recovered for human consumption through a contract or written agreement, either with a food recovery organization or service that will collect their surplus edible food, or self-haul to a food recovery organization or service that will accept the edible food. Also, a local education agency is allowed to recover edible food and provide it to its employees and students. For example, many schools have share tables to redistribute the edible food to students. So let's talk about self-haul. This was added into the regulations based upon feedback from the California Association of Food Banks. It is very expensive for the organizations and services to recover edible food. They are often dependent on philanthropic or government funding and grants, and many do not have sustainable funding. So it would help them if generators are self-hauling. However, the self-hauling has to be included in that contract or written agreement. Under no circumstances should a commercial edible food generator self-haul edible food without permission from the food recovery organization or service. This is absolutely critical to protect them from donation dumping. There is also nothing in the regulations that prohibits a food recovery organization or service from charging a fee for the services that they are providing to the food donor. There are record-keeping requirements for mandated food donors, but there are no reporting requirements. So keep in mind that each local education agency that has an on-site food facility will need to maintain its records on-site. Records can be maintained electronically or hard copy. So a school district might have an electronic system so that all of the records for each site can be maintained. Saving records electronically allows the site to have access to its records in the event that CalRecycle conducts an inspection. Records must be kept up regularly and must be maintained for 5 years. To help mandated food donors to comply, CalRecycle with HF&H Consultants developed a model food recovery agreement. The tool is highly customizable and can be found on our website. Next slide, please. Enforcement. So enforcement applies to organic waste recycling and edible food requirements. Jurisdictions are not required to enforce local education agencies. CalRecycle will conduct enforcement. Jurisdictions are not required to inform CalRecycle about individual school compliance. However, jurisdictions could let CalRecycle know if a local education agency is not implementing an organic waste program, and CalRecycle can follow up to conduct an evaluation. We will be developing a complaint process to facilitate information sharing like this. Jurisdictions are still required under AB 341 and AB 1826 to report in the electronic annual report annually on all regulated businesses, including schools and school districts that meet the threshold. CalRecycle will be developing a compliance evaluation process that we will use for local education agencies, and this will include on-site visits to review compliance. So while the regulations became effective January 1, 2022, the enforcement process is an escalating process, and the timelines are not triggered until a notice of violation or an NOV is issued. CalRecycle will always consider the totality of circumstances surrounding a local education agency's compliance prior to issuing an NOV. If the department finds that a local education agency has failed to meet the final deadline in an NOV issued, CalRecycle shall send a notice stating that it has placed the respondent on the organic waste recovery non-compliance inventory list on CalRecycle's website. The SB 1383 enforcement structure allows CalRecycle to focus on compliance assistance first and dedicate enforcement efforts to serious offenders. The regulations allow for flexibility and deadline extensions in some instances when there are extenuating circumstances causing compliance issues. Next slide, please. Resources. We highly encourage that you visit our SLCP web pages for updates and requirements on SB 1383. There is a dedicated web page for local education agencies. CalRecycle has also developed and posted on our website SB 1383 compliant model labels, signage, and brochures for local education agencies to use. The signage is available for 3, 2, and single unsegregated collection services in 10 different languages. I also have the link here to the model food recovery agreement I talked about earlier. And we continue to develop and share best management practices for local education agencies. We have a host of school waste reduction pages that include case studies, model programs, award programs, and tips so that you do not have to recreate the wheel. Next slide. The information I provided on these slides is also available as a statewide webinar on CalRecycle's YouTube page. Please feel free to send it to anyone in your school district, use it as a training tool, or even to revisit any of the talking points from this presentation. To stay up to date, you can sign up for our SLCP and schools listserv. We send out information that we believe would be helpful for schools. Like when we heard that NCRA had an open grant cycle, we definitely sent that information along. We have CalRecycle staff currently assigned to every city and county across the state. They are your points of contact if you need assistance in implementing school programs. We want our schools to be successful, and we are here to provide technical assistance if you need it. Also listed there, we have general emails for you to reach out if you have any questions. Next slide, please. Oh, yes. So that concludes my presentation. I believe we're going to open it up for questions.
We are. I know that some people did submit questions beforehand, but we're going to go ahead and open it up for the ones we see in the chat. Now, here's something that you guys need to know. We are going to save the chat. So this is something that, we can take a look at your questions and get back to you on if we run out of time. We have about 20 minutes left. So let's see. Amanda, do we have somebody who's helping us with the order of the questions?
I can start with one just off the top that I wrote down, and so we can get to the order of things. There was a question about a waiver. Could that be applied to just a school versus a district? Let's start with that one.
Yes, that could definitely apply just to a school and not the entire school district. So they would just visit our website. It's under department issued waivers, and they can apply. Just make sure that they have the correct address on there. Would be super helpful for us.
Yeah, I think this is Kara Morgan of CalRecycle. I think it would be important if a school thinks it's eligible for a waiver, but they don't think the school district is eligible, that they contact CalRecycle first so we can talk that through. There could be a particular situation as to where a school is located in a waived area, but the district itself is not. And we're going to have to explore that a bit to look into that situation. So we really prefer the coordination with waivers be done with the school district. The school district is the entity that's identified as ultimately responsible for complying with the requirements. So that's the only other thing I'd add to Kiri's point. Thanks.
Thanks, Kara. Okay, I'm all caught up now on the chat, so we're all good. Everybody can take a breath there. I've got you. So we have a question from Stacy that says, if a school's waste management company does the recycling, would that be considered compliant?
I think we might need a little bit more context.
Yeah, so Stacy, I'm wondering if you mean that you put everything in one bin and they pull out your recycling. Is that what you mean, Stacy? Do you want to hop on and clarify?
Yeah, well, some companies sort. Some waste management companies do the sorting. And so I was just wondering if if we have our current waste management company does that, so does the school district not have to do the recycling that everybody else is we're talking about on this Zoom? I know that I'm a food service director, so I do know that as far as my program is concerned, I am as far as the edible foods, but the rest of the school district is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Curie, do you want to take a whack at that, or do you want me to? It's up to you.
Yeah, I can, and then you get Karen. You can most likely will have to back me up on that one. But if your jurisdiction has a single unsegregated collection service, and if they should be in charge of making sure that material is being recovered, then yes, you would be in compliance. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Kara.
So we just need to make sure that that's what our waste management is doing. Okay.
Yeah, because that material will need to be separated out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, there are some areas of the state where a single unsegregated collection service is provided, and then the material, whether it's food waste, green waste, paper, et cetera, are pulled out at the material recovery facility. But those programs are far fewer than other types of collection systems. So I think it is going to be important that the school district works with its hauler to identify what the collection system is. The other thing I'd like to add is if it is a single unsegregated collection system, then obviously you don't need to have the separate internal containers throughout the school. You don't have to have some of the monitoring that's required in the regulations. But if it is not a single unsegregated system, then it would be necessary to comply with the other requirements that Curie showed you on that one slide, having the appropriate internal containers, having signage, providing education, and monitoring for contamination. So our team is happy to help if you need any assistance there. Jill?
Thank you, Kara. And I do want to emphasize what Kara just said. CalRecycle has people all throughout the state. And if you go on their website, you can find the person who's specific to your area from CalRecycle who can guide you through this. So you are never alone. Stacy, anybody else who have those questions, they stand ready to help. We have a question from Tanya Anderson. What about share table items? Can they be recycled to families at the school site?
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing in the regulation. So the regulations for edible food is focused on when you have edible food that needs to be donated, okay? So what you're talking about, food share tables, giving food to kids, families, et cetera, that is really before the food needs to be recovered. So if you're managing any or all of your edible food in that way, you're not subject to all of the edible food requirements. But if there's any edible food that remains, after you've given it, you could give it to employees for that matter, students, parents, et cetera, you do have to adhere to the edible food recovery requirements starting in 2024 with having that agreement or agreements and, keeping your records of the donation. So, a couple things going on there, but absolutely, we really, and even prior to that, is preventing it in the first place, right? And so prevented edible food from being generated, that's even better. But absolutely, hope that answered the question.
Well, if I can, I just want to make it as simple as possible because I've been asked this by so many of my different school sites.
Yeah.
They have a share table and I'm only talking about packaged food. It's still in the food. It's a whole apple. It's a whole orange. Maybe there's milk there that nobody, they took it and they didn't drink it. It's still sealed and it's good. If there was a share table there, and for instance, because I got another answer in here, so I just want to verify this. If there's students in there at lunch and they leave those things, that food can be taken to the office and employees can take it home, or if it went into a bag, if there was a student, because there's always families at school sites that are in need. You know, could they put some of that food in a bag and just let that student take it home because it's still on the side? It hasn't been in the kitchen. It's not going to the edible food program.
Right.
Can that still be done?
Yes, it can. And in that case, you don't have to keep the records. You don't have to have the agreement, et cetera. That can absolutely be done. And we consider that action to be before the regulations, before that requirement. So it's like what you're doing, we consider that prior to the requirement. So absolutely can be done. No records need to be kept. Now, what I would say is it would be important that by doing that, you're not intentionally spoiling edible food, right? I mean, if the intention is that's if it's
strictly, yeah, so this is when a student took it, they didn't eat it, and they know to put it on the share table. At that point, if it went into the office and those administrators knew we've got 2 kids that they're needy, let's put it in a bag and just have that kid pick it up on his way home.
Nancy, I think, is going to talk to some of the requirements.
So yeah, there's a lot of issues there. So it can't. It's the food service department's food, and they're required to monitor and keep everything safe and have it trackable. And there's items that can be reserved. And so some districts are really wanting to make sure that stays back, and there's issues on the custodial side as well. So in theory, right, that food share should come back to the kitchen, items for that district to choose how those procedures are going to be done. But a lot of districts want to consider the reservice for like the apples, the bags of carrots, the pretzels. And then what happens with that food after, right, then it could be considered for donation, but that's got to be done on a food service department's radar and procedures, because if it goes to the office, we start seeing like principals and staff kind of commandeering that food, and it starts storing up in their, their faculty lounge, they're feeding kids during other meal times, and then that becomes competitive, or there's pests and rodent issues. It starts getting messy. And then with the requirements, right, we are for CDE and USDA, there has to be a 501(c) involved in the process. Right now on our own behalf, we can't treat teachers, families, students as nonprofits by their very nature, even though they are, and we're trying to work that one out. But so there has to be a 501(c), and then we have to be monitoring the food for what's being donated, and that it's being kept safe, and that it's moving along properly. And we have that 501(c) in place. The other issue that some food service departments are leery of is because our staff are very kind-hearted, and they start to overorder because they're like, well, it's okay. If I have surplus, it's going to be donated. So it's got to be a pretty tight run ship, and it's all got to be vetted through food service department.
Right. I feel like this could almost be a whole webinar in and of itself.
Yes, it could. We can go into the weeds on this.
Yeah. If I can ask one more question about what Nancy had said. One of the issues that I have been made aware of, because I've been talking to our nutrition services on the sites, trying to work with them to, get this all together. They don't want to take it back once it leaves the counter, but you're saying that they can take it back?
It's each department is to choose, like,
but it would be okay for them to take it back, because that in itself would rectify some of those issues.
It could, and I think it's important for the food service department to take it back, because then it tells us when we have a problem.
Right, and it also will cut back on over ordering and so forth, because they're going to have that extra food. So that is an option, and it's not that remains in compliance with what all the regulations are, correct?
And the requirements on food share from the CDE's perspective is that food share bin cart is ownership to the food service department and under their monitoring system to make sure everything is being done right. And that food share is actually not allowed, custodians and staff and principals actually aren't allowed to take from the food share. Mm-hmm. I have issues that I don't think that's the best model, because I think it's really great if a principal or custodian is like, great, I'll take that salad. I love baby carrots, right? I think there's benefit to it, but
Nancy, I'd like to address a couple of things about the piece of SB 1383 that's in effect now. This is part of SB 1383 that goes into effect in 2024. We have lots of time. We want to get on this, but for all of you who are focused on that piece, we have lots of time to do another webinar. So I'd like to get to Javier's question about the now piece. Will there be funding available to LEAs to support implementation of SB 1383?
So right now, there is no specific funding for helping school districts with the recycling component of it. There was a round of edible food recovery grants. There is also a round of what's called community composting grants coming up, and schools could apply for that. So if you wanted to do some, with your school gardens, for example. So if that's maybe what we could do, Jill, is when that grant comes out, and we could also provide you information on how to sign up on that listserv, so that when it does come out, if that's something that applies. But in general, for funds related to recycling containers internally and some of the other costs, there is not currently any funding for school districts.
Thank you, Kara. Here's another great question from Robin Harbert. Is there a list of trash collection service vendors that would be available to implement the recycling or compost specific areas in my district? How do folks who are not in contact with their waste haulers, or maybe they don't know all the waste haulers in their area, find a list like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is no such list, but what I would recommend is, Jill had let you all know, we have local assistance liaisons that are assigned to every city and county in the state. And what I would suggest is you reach out to that my LAMB liaison, and then what we can do is do a little bit of research for you to find out who the service providers are in the area in which your school district is located, and then make some of those connections for you. So happy to provide some assistance on that.
Thank you, Kara. And this next question goes to composting capacity in the states. There are some places having challenges. This comes from Lizette Oliveras. We're having challenges with our waste management company conducting daily or multi-week deliveries in our district for compostable waste. They don't have the capacity to service the whole district. What support is being offered to waste management companies to expand capacity?
Yeah, I would love also, I'm not sure, Jill, who asked that question, but I would love either to have you follow up with Curie, and she'll make the connection with our local assistant staff, or contact the local assistant staff person directly. Every jurisdiction is kind of in different stages of capacity and figuring out how and where they're going to recycle their organic waste. So in your district, it could be something. So for example, in Sacramento County, the capacity is coming online in July of this year. So school districts should be able to start recycling organic waste if they can't already. So it's just every jurisdiction is different. So what we can do is look at what's going on in your area and give you some specific feedback. But capacity is coming online. More and more capacity is coming online. So there are still some gaps there. It's changing, particularly this year.
Hi, so this is Lizette Olivares. So I'm in the San Gabriel Valley area, and we wanted to be in compliance as soon as the law came into place. So we reached out to our waste management. It's just the capacity that they have is basically the household capacity. So they're only able to issue the 64-gallon containers. So they're not able to service the whole district. So we reached out to independent contractors, and they're still not able to fulfill the capacity. So it's just been challenging when we're trying to comply, and yet we don't have the resource to do that.
Yeah.
So,
well, Lizette, if you would give us your contact information, and we'll follow up with you and explore what's going on in your area. It could be that it's coming right this year and next year, but we can find that out and we can work with you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for all you're doing to comply.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love the San Gabriel Valley area. Maggie Gaynor has a great question. Would you describe more about the monitoring requirements for recycling and composting container contamination?
if Maggie could give a little bit more specificity, but the regulations basically require local education agencies, school districts, commercial businesses, state agencies to monitor, set up monitoring. So, you know, this can vary depending on how the school district is doing it. You know, in some school districts, they may have green teams that are monitoring, they may have custodial staff. The hauler may provide feedback if there's contamination that's happening. I think most importantly, it's about educating, right? All of the school district employees and students. I saw a question about that. And Jill has some great thoughts on how best to engage students. And I think that's a great, maybe a follow-up webinar, Jill, would be awesome on that.
I'm down for that.
Great models on how to deal with contamination. A lot of it is good signage and utilizing containers that are the right color and really, you know, communicating to students how important their actions are and what impact their actions are. So I think we could do a follow-up.
For sure. Thanks, Kara. Maggie?
Jackson, 6th grade science teacher, part of the NCRA board and part of the schools committee. And that is a phenomenal question and a phenomenal topic. Sorry to cut you off, Jill, but I would be happy to talk about engagement at a future webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you, Devin. You've got some great models there. So we have several more questions and probably just a few more minutes with everybody. There's still this question of verifying if you're, I think what we're talking about is a MRF. If your waste hauler takes everything to a dirty MRF, which is, for those of you who aren't sure what that is, that means that your trash and your recycling all goes together. It goes over a material recovery facility, a huge machine, and the recyclables are sorted. In that instance, if that is your community's system, what does that mean in terms of bins and signage on the LEA property?
So if that is the system, what it means is in all locations, you just have your single trash container. When we're talking about organic waste recycling, I'm not talking about edible food, but that's it. So you just have that single trash container. You're not going to have separate recycling containers, et cetera, because that's all being sorted at that facility. But again, as I noted, the number of areas where this is happening is much smaller than having to separate material at the source, right, in the classroom, in the cafeteria, et cetera. So you may have that scenario, and if that's the case, then you only need the single container, your trash containers. You don't have to have the separate recycling or green containers for food. Hope that answers the question.
Kara, who verifies whether the facility is meeting the 75% recovery? How does a school district know if their facility is a high diversion facility?
Yeah, great question. And thanks, Ruth. In the spring of 2023, CalRecycle will be publishing a list on its website of the facilities that are meeting the requirements. And so that would be the best way. But again, if you are at all kind of wondering, you can always contact your local assistance liaison at CalRecycle, and we can follow up as well.
All right, we have reached the witching hour where we now have a few announcements, and I want to thank CalRecycle so very much for being with us today. Clearly, we have lots more to talk about, and so this won't be the last that you hear from all of us, but we want to thank you all so much for being with us and for the great questions. Clearly, there's a lot to still iron out and things that we all need to understand about the next piece of SB 1383 that needs to happen in 2024. But for what's already in effect, those bins, those signs, working with your waste hauler and making sure that you know what is recyclable, what is compostable in your zip code. Those are all things that, again, your CalRecycle regional folks can help you with. So if you go on their website and look at what the resources they have for schools, one of the best ones is that person who's in your area who's going to be able to help you answer those questions. So we have a few announcements here. Nancy, Ruth, would you guys like to cover the announcements?
Sure. So to kind of follow along the lines, right? Now that we get the bins and all that set up, then it's a matter of the signage. And this is not an easy topic. Our team is there's so many details. And so we're figuring we'll spread it out into like the various different topics to consider and figure out. And it's multi-pronged for sure. It's going to be a lively discussion. And then just doing a shout out on 2 events that are coming up, Recycle Update. And this one's exciting because, right, it's held in Berkeley, but there's a virtual offer as well. So I highly suggest it. It's a 10-minute presentation. It's always fascinating content that's chosen. And then CRRA annual conference is coming up in September. And that one has what, 2-3 sessions on schools, Jill? Do you know what
a little birdie told me 4, so we'll see.
Oh, that's high count for the past. That's great. Yeah, so those are upcoming things to save the dates on.
Excellent, excellent. And just so you all know, all of this, we're going to have the recording, the slides, everything up very soon. If you want to pass this along, if you want to rewind and watch over and over again, you can always reach out to us at nicraschools@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. All of these webinars that we've put on this year were based on your feedback and your desire for knowledge. And so this isn't coming out of our own ideas. These were all webinars based on your ideas and your needs for information. We're here for you. So please keep in touch with us. Let us know what you'd like to see. We hope to see you the next time for a robust and possibly salty discussion on signage. And so we're really looking forward to that. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.